Alright guys, we have to take a moment here to talk about some new reports that are coming out that claim Sony is planning to release a remaster or possibly a remake, although it seems more likely to be a remaster of Horizon Zero Dawn. And I felt the need to make a video on this separately and as soon as I could, because this is something that is beginning to pick up a lot of steam, and there are a lot of different reactions and takes on this. And so I figured we could go over the information here and I would kind of give my thoughts on it. So first off, this is being reported by MP First. They were the first ones to break this, and it was actually while I was doing my podcast, and it really just kind of got bigger and bigger afterwards. And they say, report Horizon Zero Dawn remake / remaster in the works for PS5, Horizon multiplayer game in development. They say here that their sources did not elaborate whether or not this would be a built from the ground up style remake, similar to, say, The Last of Us Part 1. They were told that the remake features an improved lighting system, overhauled textures, and better animations with new character models to match those found in Horizon Forbidden West. And so, when you hear that, it does sound more like what you would get in a remake, not just a remaster. They continue by saying, outside of that, we were told there is a big focus on bringing the accessibility options that the sequel introduced. Different graphic modes will be available, similar to what we've seen with many other PlayStation 5 titles up until this point. They're also going to be bringing a few gameplay changes, which they say will be pretty subtle improvements. Most of them are going to be quality of life improvements that the sequel brought. And it says here, it wasn't confirmed whether or not there will be like flyable mounts or anything like that. This is this is really interesting to me, because we're just coming off of The Last of Us Part 1, and that was pretty divisive, and it still is very divisive. A lot of people were questioning whether or not a game like The Last of Us really needed a remake. It already got remastered on the PS4, and especially at the $70 price point, it wasn't going down very well with everyone. So when I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, like, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, you have to wonder to yourself, is Sony going to attempt to do with Horizon Zero Dawn the exact same thing that they chose to do with The Last of Us Part 1? Now, granted, The Last of Us Part 1, that's originally a PS3 game that just got a remaster, so it wasn't changed dramatically for the PS4. And, some people were kind of saying, like, look, it really is like an older game in that sense, where it came out on the PS3 at the very tail end, so it makes a little bit more sense for them to want to remake it. But when you look at a game like Horizon Zero Dawn, it's only 5 years old at this point. It's really fresh, in my opinion. I don't know that anybody is really asking for something like this. I want to continue reading a little bit more here from MP First, though. They say, it is to our understanding that the Horizon Zero Dawn remake / remaster will bring it closer to Forbidden West, like they said. And they said for newcomers of the franchise, the remaster and the remake is kind of being positioned as the perfect way to get into the series. And that's something that I wanted to point out here, because we're kind of seeing this trend with Sony now, where they announced all of these different movies and TV series for their games, and it seems like what they want to do is try to synergize as much as they can. And we've seen with Uncharted, they have the Legacy of Thieves collection, right, coming out around the same time the movie drops. We just saw the first Last of Us HBO trailer for the show, and that's coming right after The Last of Us Part 1 drops. And now we're seeing something similar here with Horizon. There is a Netflix series in the works, and so you have to imagine that that's kind of what this is being positioned towards. But something else I do want to point out here is they say here that 2 sources have verified that this project is indeed real. And that's the thing, is when I first talked about this, when it broke while I was doing my podcast, a lot of people didn't believe it. They're like, MP first, they're the only ones reporting on this. It comes out of nowhere. You know, who's to say that this is true? And since this first came out, multiple other reports have come out from different sources, different insiders, just people basically corroborating this and saying, yeah, that this is legitimate. This is something that's being worked on. And it continues by saying here, as it turns out, the Zero Dawn remake or remaster isn't the only Horizon related project that is in the works, as we also learned from other sources that a team, which is presumed to be Guerrilla Games at PlayStation, are currently developing a Horizon online multiplayer game for both PS5 and PC. Now, this to me was also very interesting because we've been talking for some time now about a second team at Guerrilla Games that's been working on a AAA title for many years now. It's been like 4+ years, if I'm not mistaken. We're close to that. And, you know, we've speculated for a while that maybe they're working on SOCOM, the revival, or maybe it's another Killzone game or something brand new. But, you know, it doesn't say here specifically that this is what the second team is working on. But if we put 2 and 2 together, it seems very likely that is what they're working on. We did hear that rumor as well, and some of their job listings for that team kind of indicate that, yeah, that might be what they're doing. So just to give my thoughts on that before talking about this remake or remaster, I'm definitely interested to see a Horizon multiplayer game. I will admit it's a little bit disheartening to, you know, kind of see at this point, if this all turns out to be true, that Guerrilla is basically just the Horizon studio now. I was really kind of holding out hope that what we were going to get from Guerrilla's second team was something pretty different and new and separate from Horizon. But I have to admit, when you consider, you know, like a Monster Hunter-esque type of game, but set in the Horizon universe, that definitely sounds like it has potential. Definitely something I'd pay attention to. So, you know, that I'm not necessarily upset about. I'm willing to see it and give it a chance and see what they can do there. But let's talk about the notion of a remake or remaster for Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, what I'll say is this to me seems completely and totally unnecessary. I mean, even beyond what we saw with The Last of Us Part 1. Regardless of how Sony chooses to handle this, I just want that to be clear. I really don't believe Horizon Zero Dawn needs a remaster or a remake. I feel as though if you play this game on a PS5, on Sony's latest console, it has a patch to bump it up to 60 FPS, it's perfectly fine. It really doesn't need to be brought up any more than that. And no, in my opinion, no development resources, regardless of whether it's Guerrilla or another team at Sony doing this, no development resources should be wasted on this. It's kind of sad to imagine that happening right now when you know, those development resources could be going into a new project, a new game, just something else, not this. Now, you know, some people are saying that the backlash and the people who are getting upset about this, they might be jumping the gun a little bit because we have no idea how Sony's going to handle this. Well, I will tell you this, considering the way they handled The Last of Us Part 1 more recently and how there was clearly backlash there, but, you know, Sony stuck to their, you know, their strategy and didn't budge. You can't blame people for seeing this and hearing about this and immediately assuming the worst, immediately assuming that this is going to be positioned as a Horizon Zero Dawn remake for $70 for PS5, which that's absolute worst case scenario. And if Sony does that, they're out of their minds. You know, it was already bad enough to kind of talk about The Last of Us Part 1 and how that was handled. Sony would reach truly a new level to come out here with a Horizon Zero Dawn remake for $70. That would be insanity. What I could see them doing with this is positioning it more to be more in line with something like the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection. Because you know what's interesting about this is no one really got upset about that. And I feel like the reason is kind of simple. I feel like people weren't upset about the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection because they thought it was just kind of a good deal, right? You're getting basically the the latest 2 Uncharted games. They're being brought up, and it's being sold at a reasonable price, and it seems that Naughty Dog didn't have to expend too many resources to make that happen, and it was like $50. And so, you know, there really weren't a ton of complaints there. There were some people that were like, oh, okay, you know, more remasters. And so that's where I really feel like if this is a real thing, which at this point it's safe to say it is, I think it really depends on how Sony handles it. But what I will say is, based off of the general feedback online right now and what I'm seeing, I don't know, man. It just seems like a lot of people are beginning to get fed up with the way Sony is handling this. And I also want to make it clear that when Uncharted: The Legacy of Thieves Collection, that was a pretty good deal in the eyes of most people. But since then, you know, we did get The Last of Us remake, and then now we're hearing of Horizon Zero Dawn. And I think that a lot of people are just feeling like this is too much. Sony needs to pump the brakes on these remasters and remakes. And it's also worth mentioning that Bloodborne is trending right now because people are truly baffled as to why seemingly every game except Bloodborne is getting the remaster or remake treatment and being re-released for PC as well, when, you know, fans have been basically begging Sony, on their knees begging Sony to make this happen with Bloodborne, and they just are completely ignoring it. You know, I think that this situation is kind of unfortunate because, you know, I feel like a lot of PlayStation fans right now are kind of waiting for some, you know, new game announcements from Sony, and maybe to hear about I don't know, a showcase or another state of play or just something along those lines to start talking more about PSVR 2. And, you know, here we are hearing reports that Horizon Zero Dawn is getting a remake or remaster. And I do think that no matter what, as you can see with the reactions to this, there's going to be backlash when this is announced and revealed. And so I really do feel that at this point, Sony should really read the room right now. And I doubt they're going to cancel it or anything like that, but try to position this in a way that mitigates the amount of backlash, because people, I'm telling you, they're not happy right now. And pricing and the way this is positioned and like who is it for is going to be everything for this title. And so hopefully, you know, hopefully they get that right. But no matter what, I think it's safe to say that people feel like Sony's getting a little out of hand with these remakes and remasters. So yeah, there you go. That's the current situation at this point. Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below. I'll be interested to see what you guys have to say. Leave this video a like if you enjoyed it or found it informative. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon and feel free to share the video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.